Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to our Supporting Teachers in the Classroom webinar. My name is Beth Filippo and I'm a Quality Teaching Advisor here at the Quality Teaching Academy at the University of Newcastle, and I'm going to be moderating this afternoon's webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are coming together from a range of Aboriginal lands, all unceded. I'm presenting from the land of the Pambalong clan of the Awabakal Nation here at the Callaghan campus of the University of Newcastle. And I'd like to acknowledge elders past and present and warmly welcome any Indigenous colleagues with us here today. Before I introduce the panel, I'm just going to go through a few brief housekeeping things for you. In this Zoom webinar format, it's a little bit different to a typical Zoom, so I'll just run through some of that for you. The session is going to be recorded and a link to the recording will be made available to all our registered participants mid to late next week. The chat functionality is enabled so that you've got a space that you can interact with your colleagues. We have people joining us in this webinar from every state and territory in Australia, and even a few registrations from people internationally, which is wonderful. So if you'd like to say hello in the chat, we can't see your face in this format, so it'd be great to know who's here and where you're from. We've got some of our team working in the background to monitor this, but if you have a question specifically for Jenny or the panel members, then we've got the Q&A function in this particular format. And that's where we encourage you to post any questions that can be addressed at the end of the webinar. You can find the Q&A button just down the bottom next to the share option on your Zoom screen. You can upvote or comment on these questions and we'll prioritise the questions with the most votes towards the end of the webinar. We've also got live captions enabled, so if you'd like to use them, you can click on the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. Alrighty, so this afternoon I'm joined by our panellists, Novi Palmer-Amran and Grace Camaldo from Para Hills High School in Adelaide, and they're going to jump in later on when we come to that section where we have a chat to them about their involvement with this project. And we are also joined by Distinguished Laureate Professor Jenny Gore, AM, who will be leading this webinar on supporting teachers in the classroom. Jenny's the Director of the Teachers and Teaching Research Centre here at the University of Newcastle, and also President of the Australian Association for Research in Education. This afternoon, Jenny is going to lay out some new research from the Uni of Newcastle on the state of induction for early career teachers in Australia, and she'll also share some of the latest findings from an Australian government-funded project on strengthening induction through the award-winning Quality Teaching Rounds project. As I said, at the end, we'll hear a bit from Novi and Grace about their experiences of participating in the Strengthening Induction project. And please, if you have any questions, use that Q&A function and we can sort those out when we get to that section. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Distinguished Laureate Professor Jenny Gore. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks very much, Beth. I've been given about 15 minutes to run through some things very quickly, so I'm going to go quite fast, but please feel free to ask questions after, including asking for repetition of something that I might have skipped over too quickly. Why are we interested in induction? It's actually been something the federal government has cared about and written about since at least the late 1970s. And there was a bit of research done on induction around that kind of 1990s, 2000 period, basically that found that effective induction is associated with reduced attrition, increased job satisfaction, and positive impacts on student outcomes. And so it's one of the reasons induction is so important, of course, but it absolutely depends on the number and the kinds of supports that are provided to teachers. Nationally, AITSL developed guidelines to support teacher induction in 2016, and they were updated just a couple of years ago. At the moment, they're designed to support that transition from graduate teacher to proficient teacher over a 2-year period. And the latest model has these 5 elements of induction, which are all very important. It's interesting to me, though, that they have a different kind of order of things. They're not of the same order, if you like. Mentoring, professional practice, community and workplace orientation, relationships and well-being. We'll come back to that potentially. One of the biggest challenges that we face in the induction of early career teachers are the consistent complaints, if you like, or the narrative that initial teacher education is not good enough and that new graduates are not good enough. there is this assumption that graduates are necessarily delivering poorer quality teaching. Both Linda Graham, who's an academic in Queensland, and the team here at the University of Newcastle have done research that is finding that that's just not the case at all. That in fact, early career teachers are delivering quality of teaching in the classroom, in their interaction with kids, that is actually equivalent to more experienced teachers. So we actually align very much with this statement coming from some Norwegian colleagues. I'm getting a bit of an echo there. I'm just wondering if there's someone who might need to mute their microphone just while I'm speaking so that the echo is a bit less. But these colleagues basically say that the emphasis is often on taking care of teachers as they survive the classroom or fixing their deficits, rather than actually recognising they bring assets and there are opportunities for continuous development. Because teaching is one of those activities where we never quite arrive at the final destination. That brings me to this project then, as Beth said, strengthening induction through quality teaching rounds. We've done a lot of research previously on rounds, which I'll come to in a moment. It's a federal initiative, one of 27 within the National Teacher Workforce Action Plan. And we're just over the halfway mark of this project. It's providing free professional development for 1,600 teachers from every state and territory and each sector, so government, Catholic and independent schools. All schools can actually engage as many groups of 4 teachers as you like, providing each group has at least 2 early career teachers who we define as being within their first 3 years of full-time equivalent practice, and at least 1 teacher who's more experienced. So groups of 4 with at least 2 early career. The reason induction matters so most was put really well by Sharon Feynman-Nepps, many years ago now, but she said the first years of teaching influence not only whether people remain in teaching, but what kind of teacher they become. And I mean, that's a really critical question for the future of our nation. We need great teachers who are nurturing, knowledgeable, consistent, and all of those things. But she goes on to say, if we want schools to produce more powerful learning on the part of students, we've got to offer more powerful learning to teachers. And again, that's what quality teaching rounds is intending to do. One of the biggest challenges and one of the reasons for even thinking about induction is we've heard for years about early career teacher attrition being at quite high levels. It's actually hard to pin down what those levels exactly are. But this slide shows for all of the teachers in our study, so about 418 who've completed the process so far. We've actually had 950 teachers engaged, but 418 are finished. About 70 to 73% say that they have no intention to leave in the next 6 months, which is the way we ask the question. I think it's important to recognise that when people make a decision to leave, they actually often take quite a long time to action that. So the next 6 months actually is a very short time frame. It means those who have some intention to leave, but possibly quite a long way out the door. We found here that early career teachers were at 71%, no intention to leave. The more experienced teachers in our sample at 74%. So there is that slight tendency for early career teachers to be a little bit more inclined to say that they're heading out the door. After doing rounds, though, we find a significant impact on this intention to leave. Almost 40% of those who are at the top end of that graph, so they had some intention to leave, now have none after they've done one set of 4 days of quality teaching rounds. And 2/3 of those who are at the very right-hand end of the previous graph now have no intention to leave. So what we're finding is that this project is really impacting on, if you like, the teacher shortage by keeping those really valuable teachers in the profession. This is the kind of thing we hear from participants. Brie, a first-year out teacher, said, before rounds, it was so overwhelming, so isolating. I didn't know if the 4 years of uni were worth it. But after doing this, I'm like, I can get there. I love what I do. And we find that kind of impact on experienced teachers as well. We also know that retention is more effective and more efficient, if you like, in addressing the teacher shortage than is recruitment. By the time you recruit people, put them through a teacher ed program, get them into schools feeling confident and comfortable, it can be several years. So keeping those teachers in the profession is a really important strategy. Really importantly, though, quality teaching rounds not only improves retention, it actually improves teaching and student learning outcomes. I know many of you who are joining us today are brand new to quality teaching, although there'll be some fabulous old timers with us as well, meaning you've been around for a while. But I'll just take a couple of minutes to explain what this whole quality teaching rounds thing is. It's underpinned by what we call the quality teaching model, which is a really comprehensive approach to pedagogy that treats teaching holistically and in all of its complexity. And I think that we often underestimate just how complex teaching is. The model, though, has been, if you like, encapsulated in these three big ideas that we need to have intellectual quality or develop a deep understanding of important knowledge. That, of course, means how we address the curriculum as well. We need to ensure that we're not just keeping kids safe and happy at school, but that we're ensuring we're creating classrooms that actually boost their learning. And we need to make their learning meaningful in their own lives and in the wider world. So make it more significant, which is an important way of keeping kids more engaged. It's not one or other of these, which is what we've tended to do historically in education. It's all three of these simultaneously. Each of the three dimensions is elaborated through 6 elements of practice, and we also have 1 to 5 coding scales associated with each. Those coding scales are used by groups of teachers in a confidential way, so they're not shared beyond the group, which is a really important aspect of making this feel safe for teachers. We knew very early on that having a model was not enough. We needed to have an approach to using the model, and this is where quality teaching rounds was born. It basically brings together what we know about professional learning communities as valuable, processes like instructional rounds, but then adds in the quality teaching framework. So it gives more substance, if you like, to teachers' collaborative work. It's designed to really empower teachers to empower each other. It's also quite different from a lot of professional development that's really heavily dependent on the external provider. We provide 2-day workshops and that's it in this process. At least that's all that's required. Some schools call on us for extra support, but it's not part of the process. Rounds basically involve bringing together groups of 4 teachers who discuss something they've all read. The readings are selected by the teachers. The idea is that they then have shared new knowledge, and it can really help to build that sense of professional community, because these teachers are doing some pretty vulnerable work together, but it's a way to help build those relationships. And by the way, I should say that teachers in professional learning communities can come together from any subject, any grade. You don't need to have, and in fact, we think it's better not to have all the PE teachers or all the maths teachers together, because you get benefits from watching each other teach. They go and watch one member of their group teach a whole lesson. We always watch whole lessons because we believe it's more respectful of teachers and of the teaching learning process. It's often those last 3 minutes where you draw it all together and it all makes sense. Everyone then codes the lesson on the 18 elements of the model, not because the numbers matter, but that fine-grained specification of what's happening in the lesson actually contributes to then these rich discussions that teachers have. Really importantly, the teacher who taught the lesson codes themselves as well, which means that you don't have to worry about coding me a 1 on cultural knowledge, because I coded myself a 1 on cultural knowledge, because I recognised that I not only didn't use the element cultural knowledge, but I didn't need to, because I was teaching Pythagoras' theorem and it wasn't relevant. So it's also very contextualised to your own site. The discussions go on for a long time. They talk about the lesson, and there's a turn-taking protocol that we use, but they also talk about teaching more broadly, particularly teaching at this school. What we find is that it really impacts on how teachers understand good teaching. This is encapsulated in the comment of one deputy who said, "It's the first time in my career I feel I'm actually teaching students. Until now, I've just been giving them work to do. It also impacts on their relationships. Karen was a very experienced, Susan, I mean, a very experienced teacher, and she said they didn't like me and I didn't like them. This is the group she was put with to do this. But as she says, it was only on hearsay and reputation. When I was in the room with them and working with them, I respected them, I learned to trust them, and I learned who they really were. I think that speaks to the kind of transformation of relationships that we often see with rounds. With the research we've done, and we've done a stack of it, we've seen improvement in student achievement in maths and reading using ACER's Progressive Achievement Tests, or PATS, which many of you would be familiar with. When we say improvement, we've seen 2 to 3 months additional growth for kids whose teachers have done rounds compared to matched groups of students whose teachers have not done rounds in randomized controlled trials, which is sort of gold standard research. That's huge to see professional development about pedagogy impacting significantly on maths and reading achievement, and actually across the board for teachers' practice. We've seen it across different year groups. We did a year 8 study in Victoria. Unfortunately, it was immediately post-COVID, so the study was underpowered, means we didn't have enough participants to get a meaningful result. 2 states, so we've seen significant impact in New South Wales and Queensland, in both face-to-face, where we deliver the workshops in over a 2-day period, in person or fully online. And we've even had teachers do rounds fully online. You can have 4 teachers in 4 remote schools do this work using online technologies. And we've seen successful impact on student achievement and teachers there. When I've led the workshops, but also when our advisors, people like Beth, have led the workshops. And also, really importantly, an independent trial was conducted by the Institute of Social Science Research. So we didn't just study our own initiative, we had other people studying the impact of quality teaching rounds. Impacts on teachers, we've seen significant improvement in the quality of their teaching as measured by the model. We've seen improvement in morale, efficacy, and confidence. Really interesting to me, confidence of experienced teachers goes way up, not just early career teachers, and improved collaboration and collegiality among teachers in a way that really impacts on school culture. Just one other quote here from another first-year teacher. She liked the fact that we could have experienced teachers with beginning teachers. I could observe and give them feedback. It wasn't just a one-way street, which it often is in this kind of mentor novice approach. So back to the project, and I'm just wrapping up here for me. Not only is the Strengthening Induction project aiming to improve the quality of teaching, it's also seeking to improve morale, self-efficacy, well-being, and job satisfaction, and therefore keep early career teachers in the profession, and to support those more experienced teachers who play a role in teacher induction through mentoring and other relationships. So far, we've had 972 teachers from 229 schools. Each school here is a dot on the map. Every state and territory is represented so far. We've got funding for 1,600. So there's room for whatever the sums are. I'll leave that to the maths teachers and those others who are quicker than me. What we're finding in our research is that there's really extreme variation in induction practices and programs being offered, and very different experiences for early career teachers. But they seem to be based more on the school rather than state or sector. We're not allowed to, through the ethics processes, compare states or sectors very explicitly. But we were really interested to find that it's the school that seems to make the difference, rather than government schools versus Catholic, or rather than South Australia versus New South Wales. Mentoring is by far the most common practice that's in place at the moment. Induction's perceived as workplace orientation and for accreditation primarily, which is a very limited notion of induction. This is where the photocopier is. That's probably an old school kind of representation. But you know what I mean? Here are the keys, and get through your accreditation when there's so much more that could and should be done. Induction programs are typically provided only for a year or 2. And there are lots of experienced teachers we're speaking to who would love to do more in supporting early career teachers, but they actually don't get much of a chance to do so. We're seeing huge improvement in teacher efficacy. Early career teachers here are represented in blue and more experienced teachers in the grey. So similar impact for both groups of teachers, and these are statistically significant effects. We see a big reduction in burnout for early career teachers. The experienced teacher one looks like it's gone up a teeny bit, but it's kind of not really, it doesn't really count given how small that change is. We have improved vision, trust and respect and well-being. So positive impacts. Our qualitative analysis is showing that teachers are consistently reporting impact on their knowledge, their practice, their relationships, and their well-being. Why does it work? We think it works primarily because we have this shared model of quality teaching. There's so much out there that bombards teachers about what is good teaching, and this attention to 3 dimensions of practice, regardless of whatever strategy you're using, explicit instruction or something else, you can still think about the quality of the learning experience. Provides teachers with sustained time for critical analysis of practice, which is such a luxury in schools, to have time to sit together and focus on pedagogy. And it really provides and builds a climate of trust that supports teacher professional learning. So I'm going to stop talking. I hope I haven't taken too long, Beth, and hand over to you to talk with our colleagues Grace and Novi from Para Hills High.
Thanks, Jenny. Not too long at all. Perfect timing. Okay, we're now going to hear from Novi and Grace, our panellists from Para Hills High School in Adelaide. And Novi, I might start with you. Welcome. Just hoping you're able to hear. Yes?
I should be able to. Can you hear me there?
Fantastic. I can. Thanks. Welcome, Novi. Can we just start with maybe a quick overview of the Para Hills High School context and a little bit about why you decided to take part in quality teaching rounds?
Okay, yeah. So we're a small school in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. We've got about 600 students. We probably have about 12% ATSI students, 55% EALD. We have about 100 students that are probably on an online flexible learning program as well. So on site, there's probably about 530 students. So it's a diverse population, and we're probably a Cat 2, so a low FPS school. We probably have been on a bit of a journey over the last 5 years of really improving teaching and learning practice, and that's probably happened about 5 years ago. And we really have done a lot of work on improving pedagogy. So we were looking for something that could kind of frame it all together, because I think that statement that Jenny made before, what is good teaching, is sometimes hard to qualify. And for us, we wanted a way that we could work with staff and have something to frame it, because it could actually differ from context to context. So when we obviously heard about the QTR, we found it was a model that we could implement, and it could really frame and get teachers to understand what good teaching is and have a common language about it. So yeah, a little bit of the context of why we've been included.
Fantastic. And have you been involved in quality teaching rounds, Novi?
Yep, I've partaken in a round. We're probably halfway through our staff. It's a bit of a journey getting there, and we're making it work, but it's been a really valuable experience that I've really enjoyed.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, have you had any challenges? And because you said, you know, it's a bit of a mission to get it going. So any challenges and how you've overcome those to implement it in your school?
Yeah, I think we are a smaller school, and teaching and staffing schools is probably a bit of a challenge. So we have a bit of a transient staff. So some of the challenges, we've been trying to find some consistency of having new teachers come in all the time and work in the groups. And then obviously being able to find TRT cover to release staff has been a bit of a challenge too, because there's been a lack of relief teachers in our area. So we've kind of adjusted the model a little bit to suit our school. So we've jigged it around so it doesn't all sit in a day, and we can make it work in our professional learning time. But it's been manageable, and once we've had the model working now for 6 months, I feel like it's working quite well.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Novi. Grace, you're an experienced teacher at Para Hills High School. Jenny had a quote in her presentation from an early career teacher in the project. I'm going to read out the full version of that quote. It said, "I just really like the fact that you could have your experienced teachers with the beginning teachers, and I felt like it was nice that I could observe someone and give them feedback, that it wasn't just the one-way street of I'm not capable, you must give me feedback." But to be able to give feedback on someone else, I think, was really nice too. So like I said, that was from an early career teacher. How does that align with your experience as a later career teacher working with colleagues at different career stages or across faculties?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a major strength of the program, right? Everyone's given equal opportunity to do coding. Everyone's voice is equal. And I'm in my 5th year of teaching, so I do remember being an early career teacher and thinking, oh my goodness, like there's just no way I can offer any sort of useful advice to someone who's been teaching for like 5, 10, 15 years. But through the process, and I guess to speak a bit to what Jenny was saying earlier about how it's actually beneficial to group English and science and maths teachers together and not to isolate them in their faculties. You just learn so much about different strategies that might apply to your subject area. And early career teachers have just come out of uni, so they're in a context that's completely different to a teacher that's been potentially in the same school for like upwards of 10 years. So whether it's to do with different ways to use technology or different ways to work with like neurodiverse learners, I think it really gives early career teachers an opportunity to show off their full range of skills and and just to learn from each other.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Grace. My brother has recently started teaching, and he said to me in his first 6 months, how do I know if I'm doing it right? And I think that's a really, probably a common feeling for early career teachers. Was there anything else that you found interesting or unexpected when you headed into quality teaching rounds?
I think the biggest thing, so I was obviously in a group with 3 other teachers, and I think we take for granted the fact that like our students will come to us and we'll teach them for however long our lesson goes for, an hour or somewhere around there. But we gained an understanding of what it is to be a student sometimes as well, because you are sitting through an entire lesson that another teacher is giving. And like full credit to our students, they try their hardest, but sometimes they are sitting there and they probably don't have any idea what is being taught content-wise. And I felt that way in a year 11 physics class. I felt like it gave me that perspective back that I don't get when I'm teaching English, because I understand the content. So yeah, in a way, it gave me a student perspective as well as exposing me to different subjects and how they run around the school. And that was sort of something that was shared among the 4 of us who did the round together.
It is an absolute privilege to be in other people's classrooms, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And
one of my favourite things.
No, you go for it. Yeah.
So this is probably something that both of you would have an answer to as our final question. What benefits have you seen for your students and or for your teachers at Para Hills?
Yeah, I could probably start with that one. So I think there's been some fantastic benefits for our teachers. I think being able to have the time to really reflect on practice and having 3 other staff members in your class in a way in which teachers know that it's not so much performance-based, it's improvement-based, because it stays confidential. There's been some really good outcomes with staff really being open then from really focusing on what they want to improve on in their teaching practice. And it's been done in a way that's probably not so what's the word that I'm trying to use? It's probably not so daunting for staff. Because they know that it's not performance-based, it's really collegiate. And then there's been lots of groups really focused on having strong discussions on improving their practice in a way that really drives improvement.
Thanks, Novi. Grace, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, just to add to what Novi was saying about, I guess just fostering a culture of observation. And like I've been at a previous school where it wasn't the norm to step into people's classes. And if a teacher did come into your room, there was this assumption that something was going wrong or you were being watched or your practice was just under a magnifying glass. And I think QTR, even just the language that we use is really helpful. Like we're not given scores, we're given codes. Everyone's very clear on what's being looked for. And that obviously puts teachers at ease. You can't teach when you feel like you're being judged, and no one has felt like that at any stage throughout the process.
That's wonderful. Jenny, do you have any questions for Novi or Grace? Oh, you're on mute.
I realised I was on mute. I'm not on mute anymore. No, I don't think so. I suppose it's just great to hear that it's having the kind of impact that we hear wherever we go. And it's terrific for us to see the kind of difference that can be made in schools like yours that have a lot of challenges and complexity. But we also see really big impact in some of our elite independent schools that we're working with as well. And what's also interesting, I suppose, seeing the same kind of impacts around the world. We've just finished a project in Sweden. We've had colleagues who've introduced the quality teaching model in Albania and in Japan, and a whole lot of other kind of countries. And just to see that there's so much in common about teaching and learning, and so much we can learn from one another. And it's not always about the external kind of expert. It's about what teachers themselves know. And I think, we're talking about mostly contexts where people are degree qualified. And I think you know a lot, and trusting yourselves and building your own confidence is what this project sets out to do, and it seems to be doing it. So no question per se.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm going to throw it back to you. We don't currently have any questions in the Q&A. So if anybody watching does have a question for Jenny or for Grace or Novi, if you could pop those into the Q&A function. I think Jenny's got a few slides left to go through, and then we'll get to those questions after that. Oh, you're on mute again.
And there is one question in the chat that perhaps Novi or Grace might like to answer rather than me, which is there an example of how the QT model has impacted or worked in a specific subject? And, we don't do subject specific necessarily in rounds, but can you perhaps talk through an example of how in English, Grace, it's changed something that you do, or Novi, you're PE, aren't you?
Yeah, but I probably was in an art class when I did it.
Okay.
Actually, one of the things which was really interesting, I'll obviously would just talk of an example within my group, is that we observed one of our other teachers who was a dance teacher, and they obviously focus a lot on practical and dialogue. And one of the other teachers really noticed, even though it was from another subject area, that took note of that teacher and how they did it in another subject area, and realized that then when they reflected and coded on their lesson, that was something that was drastically missing. And there was a science class, and there could be a lot more dialogue included into the lesson. And it was just an interesting reflection, because it's some of those sometimes non-practical lessons that are probably, I'm not going to say less engaging, but sometimes students find less engaging. But it was learning from that was taken. I think in our context, we did it obviously cross faculties, because we really wanted to share that across the school, and our school's not that large. So it would be hard for me to pin an exact subject improvement apart from an example like that.
As well. Don't feel you have to.
No, only just to say one of the readings that a teacher brought in was about, this is so specific, about the gradual release of responsibility. And they were under the assumption that that had to be quite isolated. It had to be 10 minutes of I do, 10 minutes we do, 10 minutes you do. I think they just had misunderstood what that might look like in the classroom. And so we saw a science lesson where that cycle was sort of repeated like 3 times. They'd run through it, a skill, I do, we do, you do. And then that teacher was able to take that away. So I guess just refining their understanding of things they had mislearned.
Right. Yeah, that's good to know. Did you want to go to any other questions, or shall I just share the screen again, Beth?
There are a couple of other questions coming through in the chat. One of them says, can you provide an example of something that would be coded during an observation? So I guess we're talking maybe about coding a specific element.
Yeah, so each of the 18 elements is coded. So higher order thinking, you'd be looking at, was there any higher order thinking in the lesson? It might code a 1 if nothing was higher order, if it was all just rote recall. A 3 on higher order thinking is that at least one significant question was posed or activity involved higher order thinking. And a 5 would be that most of the students most of the time are doing higher order thinking. And this is not like everyone needs to code a 5 on everything. The idea is that the the differentiation between the different codes give us the basis to have discussions? And would it have helped if there was some more higher order thinking? Or was this the kind of lesson where kids just needed to practice stuff over and over until it became automatic? So it's one of the reasons I think it has been embraced so widely by teachers, is that it's not dictating in any kind of overly prescriptive way how every lesson has to be. It provides a basis for describing lessons, and then your discussion gets you into conversation about would other elements have made a difference, or if you'd coded, really high on meta language, one of our elements, would it have actually taken away from deep knowledge and deep understanding? So that's just a little sense, I guess, of how the coding works.
And I think it's also answered this next question, which asks about the 18 elements and the 3 dimensions, if they have detailed elaborations or descriptions. And I think you've just answered that. Yes, they are.
They're quite detailed, but really simple in a way. Like they're pretty much one-line statements for every code. And coding 18 things sounds like a lot, but we find teachers the very first time they do this take up to 30 minutes. But once I've done it a couple of times, it takes about 10 minutes to code a lesson. Like, it's actually a surprisingly easy process. And we also find that, teachers quite often agree, but they also can disagree, particularly when they've seen different things in the lesson or come from different backgrounds themselves. And those disagreements are the basis for those really powerful discussions. So we really encourage people to, in the individual coding, come up with their own views. And then they share those views. They say why they coded it the way they did. And then they try to come to agreement, not because the number, matters that much, but because the rich discussions that happen about practice come through debating what's the best code for this lesson. And again, it's not as simple as adding up the numbers, because you can't just say that a lesson that added up to 68 is better than a lesson that added up to 57, because it all depends on context. So it's been really developed in a way that makes it sort of safe and very comfortable for teachers.
Thanks, Jenny. Just wanted to mention Belle from Appin Public School. You've got your hand up, and if you want to pop your, there we go. You've come into the meeting, which is great. Tom's got you in. Did you have a question, Belle?
Need you to unmute yourself if you do want to ask a question.
Might give Belle a minute. There is one more question from Mark, who's wondering if you can comment on the difference between QTR and other frameworks such as Step Lab, and what are the key distinctions?
Yeah, I mean, it's slightly a longer discussion than perhaps we have time for. But basically what we find is there's a lot of overlap between other approaches to good teaching. But what Quality Teaching Rounds does that's quite unique is it really draws attention, if you like, to the kind of principles. I often talk about not the practices of teaching, but the practice of teaching, akin to the practice of law or the practice of medicine. What are the key guiding forces that we need to hang on to when we're caught up in all the detail of delivering the curriculum and managing kids' emotions and all of the stuff that is part of teaching? So I think it has that real focus on the purposes of teaching, but it also provides great specificity around the 18 elements. Some of the other models, I know I did some work on Step Lab about a year ago. I actually can't think of the details of it at the moment, but there are a lot of other processes that really get teachers to focus on one thing at a time, or that are more general, asking teachers, what did you notice about the lesson, what was important, and so on, which can be powerful, but can also be hit and miss depending on who comes together in the group. So one of the things that I love about Quality Teaching Rounds is when we ask teachers to have the discussion after watching the lesson and doing the coding, there's no awkwardness, there's no hesitancy. The first person just said, well, I coded deep knowledge, the first of our elements of 5, because I saw a sustained focus on X and Y. And the second person might say, well, I coded at a 2, because you covered so much in that lesson, I don't think anything was done in depth. And then you'll go around the group, and then the discussion actually helps people to come to some kind of agreement about, well, what do we mean by depth? what does that look like in a year 11 or year 7 maths classroom and so on. So I don't know if that's an adequate answer, but that's all I've probably got time for at the moment.
Thanks, Jenny. We're going to thank you, everybody, for your questions and for your participation. Thank you, Grace and Novi, for joining us. I'm going to throw back to Jenny now.
Just to finish off then, I'm sharing screen, am I? Yes. It's not transferring. If you do want to get involved, and it's a great way to try out quality teaching rounds, here's the QR code for our expression of interest form. You can get 4 teachers involved. There's no other commitment from the school. And so just you can submit an expression of interest anytime. We have until about the middle of next year for those EOIs. So we'd encourage you to get in sooner rather than leave it to the last minute, particularly if the 1,600 places get taken. Basically, all it involves is a principal consent form that's signed. The 4 teachers need to sign a consent form. We ask the teachers to do 2 surveys about a week apart. They're quite short, less than 10 minutes. They then come to a 2-day workshop, either face-to-face or online. We provide surveys, we provide workshops all over the country. So it's not necessarily a huge amount of trouble. You're certainly not having to come to Newcastle. The group then does their 4 days of in-school rounds, and then they do 2 surveys after they've completed. And that typically happens over the course of about a term. So the 4 days are typically about a week apart, because you need that week to do some of the learning that comes from reflecting on the previous round. You also don't want it to be so far apart that you're not building that relationship kind of momentum that comes from working with colleagues. So that's all I wanted to share. Really happy to take some more comments. If you do want to reach out, you can just phone our project phone number at the bottom there, or contact our project manager, Tarina, or have a look at our website. So that's basically it from me, and happy to take any more questions. And I might just stop sharing again so that we can see one another.
So Amy's asking, are we still eligible with only 1 beginning teacher?
My screen has just dropped out. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you see me?
Yes, we can. You froze for a bit, but you're back.
I'll try not to pull any weird faces. If you only have 1 beginning teacher, I think the answer is yes. One option is that you try and combine with another school, perhaps. And we have had lots of schools who've sort of done 2 and 2, 2 from one school, 2 from another. If you've got a school nearby that might have an early career teacher, and they can even cross primary, secondary boundaries. We know a lot of people who've had the experience with going into primary schools as secondary teachers, for example, and found that really valuable as well. If you've only got the 1 beginning teacher, I think it might still be possible. So I'd just give Tarina, our project manager, a call, or email us, and we'll just talk to you about the specific circumstances of your school.
Can you just pop that page back up again, please, Jenny? Someone's asking to get those contact details again.
Yes, sorry, I should
That's
have.
okay. That's all right. And Tom has just popped into the chat. If you're interested, there's a link there for some more information about our induction. Oh, the one with the model. Sorry, Susan wanted to see the one with the model.
One with the quality teaching model? Steps involved. All the steps involved. My computer seems to be reacting very slowly, but hopefully you've got that now.
Okay. We've got it up there now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So really it's 2-day workshop for the 4 teachers. They don't all have to go to the same workshop, by the way. So you can have 2 perhaps go to one and 2 to another. They like to go in pairs, I think. So the 2-day workshop and the 4 days of rounds. So the workshop is free. It's typically $900 and something for the 2-day workshop. So that bit's covered by the federal government grant. Obviously, you still have to find a way to create the time for your teachers to have those 4 days together. As I said, typically spread over about 4 to 8 weeks.
Tom's just written back to Lyndon, but the question is around staffing difficulties and having 4 teachers off for 4 days. So he's asking if there's another way to do it that is as effective, and just letting people know that we do have some possible adaptations, and that's something that we can work with your school on, depending on your context and your situation with staffing.
Yeah, we talk about adaptations in the composition of the PLC, in the timing of the activities within rounds, which sounds like the little adaptation that Para Hills has made, and using technology to help with some aspects of the process. Those adaptations are also elaborated during the workshops, but yeah, happy to have that chat.
Absolutely. Yes, Amy, we will be emailing anyone who's registered with the video, with the link to this presentation. So you'll get that hopefully early next week sometime. And thank you, Jenny. I was just going to ask if you could pop, there's the contact details back again for the induction project and the project manager, Terena. All righty. I think we've addressed everything. I'm sorry if we've missed. I'm pretty sure we've answered all of the questions that were there. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to email us and we can address those for you. But for now, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate after school is a hectic time, so we appreciate you joining us, and hopefully we'll get to see you as part of our induction project at some point. Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Novi and Grace.